Hi guys, it's Miss Summers with your notes today, May 9th, 2018. Your notes today are on this sheet. It's about climate and its characteristics, and you'll see these letters on the side. They spell out Lawmow. For this sheet, I want you to take the grid side, and fold the edges inside so that the Lawmow is on the outside now. And we are going to actually start Lawmow. We're actually going to start on the back. So everything that's on the slides will go in their appropriate little boxes. So we're going to start with what is climate, its two characteristics, and then we'll bounce back to this side and we'll do L-A-W-M-O-W. All right, so let's go to the notes. So you just read an article on Newsella about climate and weather. And we need to start on the back. What is climate? So hopefully from that article, this is what you picked up. So right here where it says climate is a long-term pattern of weather. Weather is different than climate because it changes day to day. So a good analogy for this, weather would be like your outfit that you wear. All right, you change your outfit every day, but your style is fairly consistent. So climate tends to be pretty stable, weather is not as predictable. All right, the two main characteristics of climate are precipitation and temperature. So we might look at ranges, how hot does it get in the summer, how cold does it get in the winter, and with precipitation, we might look at the amount overall, and we might look at the timing of the amount. Does a place get all of its rain over the course of 2 or 3 months, or is it spread out throughout the year? All right, so different places have different climates because of these things called factors, and we're going to look at 6 of them, and their abbreviation is Lawmow. So if you flip over to the side, we're going to start with the L. You write the word on the outside, and then on the inside box is where you'll put the picture. I have pictures for most of these. You can just draw very simple ones. Pause the video when you need to, and then the definition and then the explanation. All right, so our first letter is latitude. So write latitude on the outside under the L. Open up the box. Latitude is how far you are from the equator. The farther you are, the colder it is. We learned that on the first week of school. What you might not be aware of is that rainforests or tropical rainforests are almost always at the equator. Because at the equator, it's always warm, the air rises, condenses, and makes clouds. Deserts are almost always at 30 degrees latitude. The dry air that rose at the equator and all the water fell out of it at the equator, all that leftover air is dry, it falls back down at 30 degrees. All right, put a star next to the L for latitude. Latitude is the most important factor when it comes to climate. All right, this is the picture I want you to go with. If you don't have a whole lot of space, you can always do half of the circle. So tropics are always going to be between the equator and 23 degrees, either north or south. That's the red. Temperate is going to be from the Tropic of Cancer or the Tropic of Capricorn all the way up to 66 degrees. And temperate just means moderate, so it's not super hot, but it's not super cold. And then anything above 60 degrees all the way up to 90 is polar. So very, very cold all the time. Pause the video if you need to draw it. When you come back, we'll move to the next slide. All right. So here's another example. You don't need to write this down, but if you feel like it would help you, that's great. The average temperature in Miami in May is 81 degrees, whereas the average temperature in New York City in May is 72 degrees. All right, even though these places are in the same country, Miami is further south. It is closer to that tropic zone. New York is farther away. It's higher in latitude. All right, so that is our L for Lawmow, latitude, the most important factor. Our next one, so now we're on the outside again, write altitude for A. Altitude is the same thing as elevation. You might hear those words exchanged, and that's okay. It's basically how high up you are. The higher you are, the colder it is. The picture I want you to draw is this mountain in the background, not these little giraffes. But as you can tell, these giraffes, they live in Africa. It's pretty warm most of the time. They don't really have like a winter or summer. They have a wet and dry season. But this mountain in the background always has snow on the very top. This mountain is Mount Kilimanjaro. Its latitude is at 3 degrees south of the equator. But because its altitude is so high, it is always colder at the peak. Our next word, so we're at our first W, number 3, water, and our proximity to water. So proximity means how close you are. If you're closer to water, you will have milder climates. And milder means it's not super hot and it's not super cold. It's sort of in the middle. And generally, if you're close to water, you will have more precipitation. You have a source of water for that precipitation to come from. An example of extreme precipitation that you can get based on where you are from water is called a lake effect snow. So here is what that can cause. This is a football game that was played 2 years ago in Buffalo, New York. Buffalo, New York is on one of the Great Lakes. When cold air from Canada goes over the lake, some of the water gets picked up and it dumps on the other side as several feet of snow. So here's a picture. This graph has to do with temperature range. So again, landlocked has a bigger range than places near an ocean. And this image is about lake effect snow. I care more about this graph, so if you need to pause and sketch this graph right quick, go ahead and do so. When you come back, we'll move on to the M. All right. So the M, so on the outside, we're going to write M for mountains, and then we're going to write these two definitions in our box. So go ahead and pause it if you need time to write it. All right. We have two sides of the mountain. The windward side is the side that wind is coming up, and generally it's going to face a body of water. This side will be wet. It will have more precipitation. Think of places like Seattle where it's always raining. It is on the windward side of the Cascade Mountains. The leeward side is on the opposite, is away from the wind, or away from the water, excuse me, and it forms a rain shadow. It's drier. So what that looks like, so here's our windward side. The wind is picking the water up, carrying it up the mountain. It gets colder. You have more condensation and precipitation. So this is the wet side of the mountain. On the leeward side, there's no water. All the water fell over here. The leeward side is drier. So go ahead and pause if you need to draw this right quick, and then we'll move on to O. All right. So O is a nice letter for us because we already actually know this. So write ocean currents on the front. So ocean currents affect climate because they change the temperature of their surrounding areas. So we did an assignment a few weeks ago where we looked at the latitude of different places and then the water temperature. And we saw like latitude wasn't the only thing that changed temperature. Some of the water was colder even if it was on the same latitude. It depends on what kind of current is flowing through. So Brazil is on a warm current. So Brazil is generally a pretty warm place. Whereas Chile, even though it's on the same latitude, it gets the same amount of sunshine. There is a cold current. The Peru current carries cold water near it. It makes it colder. So the picture that goes with this is the Gulf Stream, and this is a horrible picture. You don't have to draw this like super exactly. But I do expect you to know that the Gulf Stream affects the climate of the eastern United States as well as Great Britain and the rest of Western Europe. Warm water is carried from the equator, slingshots across, and makes this whole region of the world a little bit warmer than it normally would be. So take a minute to draw something like this. If you want to simplify it, you can just draw a red arrow going up. That's warm current, goes towards the poles, and then a blue arrow going down. That's cold current. It goes from the poles to the equator. All right, and our last one, there's no picture for this. This is the last thing we're doing with this note. Wind patterns. Wind patterns are generally will push weather systems in one prevailing direction. So in the United States, when you watch the Weather Channel, you'll note on the long-term forecast, if something is happening like out in the plains, like in the Midwest, generally it moves towards us, towards the East Coast. That's because the prevailing wind is blowing from the west to the east. All right, so we should have a completed Lawmow notes. If you need to go back and draw any of the pictures, please do so. You're going to now move on to the assignment with the imaginary continent. Use your notes that you just took, and you're going to answer the questions 3 through 10 on your own. All right. If you have any questions, you can ask me in class, or you can leave a comment here, and have a great day.